So haptics over the years have come from something that was so simple as just recreating a specific vibration to make something as simple as like a drill or a notification like a vibration is happening, to stuff that's more advanced that we saw in video game consoles.
All right, almost Dr. Castro. Can you please define to me the difference between basic haptics and advanced haptics by providing some examples?
Sure, let's talk about like what haptics are to begin with, right? We detect a sense of touch as essentially vibrations.
Yeah.
Everything in the world is vibrating around you, right? Whether if vibrating a lot, you can also get the sense of temperature. If it's vibrating not so much, it seems colder. The way that things transfer vibrations help understand the thickness or the hardness of material as well. So that's how we interact with the daily world. And when you touch things and all this information is going through your fingertips have these sensors in them that are really able to detect the vibrations of the world, right? When you rub your hand over something like a surface that has a bunch of rough surface, you can feel almost like a record player, like in your hand's a needle. As you move across it, you can detect information from moving across it. And that's how we know certain things are what they are without even having to look at them, smell them, or use any of the other senses. So haptics take that sensory mechanism and they take advantage of it by leveraging and creating false vibrations to try to trick your senses into believing that something is happening that's not happening, right? And it's also the same way like a speaker works. A speaker basically recreates those vibrations in the air, so that way it makes you think you're hearing something that you're not actually hearing. The same way that any sort of vibration that's added to your sense of touch can then say, oh, something's happening here, right? So let's say you have a drill and you press the trigger of a drill and then you feel the vibration of the drill happening at a certain rate. If I can replicate that rate from a mass that moves back and forth that simulates what the drill is doing, then who's to say that if my eyes are closed and I'm pressing a trigger and I'm feeling it move back and forth that I'm not squeezing a drill if I, for every sense and purpose feel like I am. And so haptics over the years have come from something that was so simple as just recreating a specific vibration to make something as simple as like a drill or a notification like a vibration is happening, to stuff that's more advanced that we saw in video game consoles, right? Then there was that rotary thing that could change speeds, and so it could vibrate faster or vibrate slower depending on what you're doing. And then in racing games, we felt it moving over gravel, it would run slowly.
There's a trigger sensitivity now as well, so like you can recreate in different first-person shooters, for example. You can understand like what different types of weapons you might be using in like a Call of Duty, which is trying to reinforce, by the way, not a lot of people use it, but there's things that are being introduced.
Right, and that's an advancement of haptics, right?
Yeah.
Initially, something going with a rotation wasn't able to do something like that, but now we get to something that's a little more of like a linear actuator that actually is moving forward and backwards instead of around. You get to do more advanced things like that, and then you get to change it, right? You can now have resistance into it as well as something like So that is allowing for other types of nuance that can happen, but it's still something that you can kind of tell that it's not real. If you take away other senses, right? There's still something that happens. There's a one-to-one relationship with the vibration of the drill to the sound of the drill, and you know that that's happening. And even if you were to recreate the sound of the drill from a speaker behind this item that you're recreating and then simulate the haptics of it, you're still going to notice a detachment between it. And that's one of the reasons why the VR world hasn't really exploded yet, because we can still tell that there's a difference, because the things that are happening in front of you aren't causing the other senses to react to it the way that we expect them to in the real world. And that's hopefully the goal of haptics, is to get to that point. But I think that if we keep thinking of them as just a way to recreate a certain level of vibration for efficiency's sake, I don't believe that they're ever going to get to that point unless we really rethink the way we think about haptics and how they have to engage with the other senses as well.
So can you define to me something that might be considered like advanced haptics, if what you're talking about and considering all the other senses in that kind of spectrum? Let's talk about like, if it was to follow audio, right, which we've defined before, right? What can you now start doing with haptics that you've never been able to do before if you had the entire frequency range accessible to you?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, for example, one of the main deficiencies of the existing haptics, the pure haptics, is that they occupy a very narrow frequency band. And let's take the drill example is a good example of how that would probably be achieved, because a drill is doing one frequency at the same time. But let's say it's not a drill. Let's say it's something that's more lifelike, like a person talking or a cat purring. That's not happening at just one frequency. There's many frequencies frequencies that are involved there because of the way that the bronchial and the larynx is interacting with the air that's coming in and out, that's causing these harmonics and overtones, which is basically a distortion that happens when you have the fundamental frequency, which is the air coming out, and then it hits all the sides of it that causes other resonances that happen inside the chamber of your body by the time it comes out. And if you know about instruments or playing an instrument, you know that that's the same thing as when you blow air through a reed, it's causing one vibration, but then every time you plug a hole, it's causing different vibrations to resonate down the way. And so people and living beings are no different from that, which there are multiple harmonics at any given moment in any living being. And if you want to recreate the sense of a living being in front of you, you have to be able to recreate these advanced complex harmonics that are going to fluctuate based on what that person's talking about. As I'm speaking right now, I'm using my voice, which has a fundamental frequency, but my inflection and my nuance, and every time I speak with any sort of inflection is how that fundamental frequency is bending, taking along these other harmonics with it. And if you analyze them on a spectrometer, you can actually see how all of those things move at the same time. And that's something that just can never be recreated with a traditional haptic sense of it. You have to have something that's capable of reproducing these complex harmonics at a high bandwidth, at a high level of detail, in order to simulate that sensation that somebody or something is there.
So if we were to redefine how we're approaching haptics and we're redefining in this lens, do you think that will unlock the ability to create brand new virtual worlds and real worlds and make them feel one-to-one, which is the ultimate vision of all these immersive companies out there?
I think so, yeah. At the time, even if it's just adding one other sense to have a one-to-one relationship, that's at least a step closer to having just one sense being engaged. When you have multiple senses engaged, it's a multiplicative effect. It's not just an additive effect. If you feel hot and smell hot, like if you smell your skin burning, you know something is hot before you have to hear it, before you have to see it or anything. You can feel and smell, and that has a multiplicative effect because each sense that tells you something is happening is confirming the other senses. So it's then saying to the other senses that sense is true in what it's perceiving, which gives you more confidence in trusting that sense. So adding another sense, even if it's just one extra sense, is a multiplicative effect, not just an additive effect.
Haptics has a lot of work to do, but
I think so.
I'm glad that we can play a part in that.
Likewise.